Welcome to the Youth Parliament Alumni Debate. Before I begin, I just want to recognize the presence of the Honourable Dennis Lister, JP Speaker of the House, our judges for today's debate, the Honourable Tanae Furbit, Minister of Youth, Social Development and Seniors, Shamori Talbot-Woolridge, and former Youth Opposition Leader Destiny Taylor, and other special guests, Dr. Kudo, JP Shadow Minister of Finance, and former youth parliamentarians in the gallery, Teo Wolf, who was the former Youth Premier, RJ Peets, former Opposition Leader, and former youth parliamentarians, Teray Toll, Stefano Ascendo, and Russell Lister, who's also an advisor for Youth Parliament. Okay, today's debate brings together two generations of youth leadership, our current youth parliamentarians and youth parliament alumni. This event reflects the purpose of Youth Parliament, to cultivate informed, confident, and engaged future leaders. The motion before the House today is this House would lower the legal voting age to 16. The government bench, represented by current youth parliamentarians Zara Siddiqui, Chris Medeiros, and Monica Clark, will argue in favor of the motion. The opposition bench, represented by Youth Parliament alumni Ariana Keynes, Mackenzie Cole-Tuckett, and Yai Wandera, will argue against the motion. This debate will follow parliamentary protocols. Each side will have 3 speakers, and each speaker will have 5 minutes to present their arguments. I will also entertain calls of information in between. The speakers are expected to address myself as the Speaker of the House, refrain from directly addressing other members of the House, and maintain respectful parliamentary language and protocols. I ask all participants and those guests in the gallery to maintain decorum throughout the proceedings. We will now begin. I recognize the Honourable Member from the government. Please speak into the mic if you can. Turn it on. Press the button, yes? There you go.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for acknowledging me today. This House would lower the voting age to 16 in Bermuda. This motion proposes that Bermuda amends its electoral laws so that citizens aged 16 and 17 are legally eligible to vote in parliamentary elections under the same conditions as any other eligible voter. Imagine being old enough to work, pay payroll taxes, volunteer in your community, represent Bermuda in sports and competitions, care for your younger siblings, and make decisions about your future, but not having a voice in choosing the government that shapes the future. We believe that lowering Bermuda's voting age to 16 strengthens democracy because those affected by decisions made deserve accurate representation. Our first point is youth representation. Democracy works best when the people affected by government decisions have meaningful voices in choosing that government. Young people in Bermuda are not only the future of our country, they are a part of its presence. Yet their voices remain underrepresented because they cannot vote. Politicians naturally focus on people who can elect or remove them from office. Elections create incentives. When 16 and 17-year-olds are excluded from voting, governments have fewer electoral reasons to prioritize issues that directly affect them, including youth unemployment, the affordability of higher education, mental health services, recreational opportunities, affordable housing, and the rising cost of living. By lowering the voting age to 16,
Recognize the Honourable Member from the Opposition. Just by the shape of Bermuda's population. Please use the mic, sorry.
Bermuda's an aging population, hence, just empirically, right? The share of 16 to 18-year-old individuals that you'll be targeting will be so small that wouldn't that still be an insignificant portion for politicians to target from their perspective? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chris.
I recognize the Honourable Member.
My colleague Chris will answer that question. By lowering the voting age to 16, these issues became politically important because young people become active participants in elections. Better representation ultimately leads to public policy that reflects the interests of Bermuda's entire population, not just those above the age of 18. Our opponents may argue 16-year-olds are too immature to vote. However, Age is a poor measure of political competency. Many 16 and 17-year-olds closely follow current events, understand public policy, and participate in community discussions, while many adults vote with limited political knowledge. Democracies do not require citizens to pass intelligence or civics tests before casting a ballot, because political equality is based on citizenship, not knowledge or intelligence. If a lack of political knowledge is not a reason to remove voting rights from adults, it cannot fairly be used to deny young people the same right. Expanding the franchise to 16-year-olds treats citizens equally and rejects unfair assumptions based solely on age. Our second point, global alignment. Bermuda would not be taking an untested or uneducated risk by lowering the age to 16. Several well-established democracies have done so successfully. Austria lowered its voting age to 16 for all elections in 2007. Brazil, Argentina, and Ecuador also allow voting from age 16 under certain electoral systems. In parts of Germany and Scotland, 16 years old are also vote in state and local elections. These examples demonstrate that lowering the voting age strengthens democratic participation without weakening democratic institutions. Bermuda has the opportunity to learn from other successful democratic examples rather than be afraid of change. In Bermuda, citizens must currently be at least 18 years old to vote in parliamentary elections under island electoral laws. Yet many 16 and 17-year-olds are already making meaningful contributions through schools leadership, employment, volunteering, sports, and community services, as well as competitions, international as well, while living under the consequences of government decisions. And finally, in our opinion, by lowering the electoral age, Bermudians would be opening doors for better youth representation, but further expanding Bermuda and her people to a new age in which the youth are not just seen, but they are heard and given a voice. That will lead to better policy making and a better reflection of the interest of Bermuda's entire population. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I recognize the honourable member from the opposition bench.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the opposition to ask this court, or pardon me, Mr. Speaker, perhaps too comfortable for my day job. I rise on behalf of the opposition to ask this honorable House to reject the motion offered by the government and keep the voting age to 18. Now, Mr. Speaker, this is not an attempt by the opposition to return to the dire days of yesteryear, in which the limitation of voter participation was used as a tool to enable oppression in this country. Mr. Speaker, there is no interest of the opposition to curb the voice of Bermuda's young people. Instead, we query why the government would push for the inclusion of a 16-year-old vote without adequate infrastructure and systems to enable such a vote. And Mr. Speaker, that brings me to my first point, and the point that will be explored by my colleagues in the honorable opposition, which is that there is a lack of civic preparation on this island. We do not, Mr. Speaker, have island-wide civic education mandates. So, Mr. Speaker, the question must be asked, are we empowering the youth or giving them power without guidance? Regarding our second point, the opposition will expand upon the point, Mr. Speaker, that there is a limited window for meaningful participation for 16-year-olds in Bermuda, so allowing them to vote will actually be unfair for all. The reality in Bermuda is this, Mr. Speaker. For many young people, the expected path is to leave Bermuda between the ages of 17 to 22 and to gather qualifications and experience that cannot be obtained here. As such, many 16-year-olds will vote under this suggested regime and shortly thereafter leave Bermuda. And it could be an entire election cycle before they decide if they even want to bother to come home. Mr. Speaker, elsewhere in our electoral system, the standard is that voting is reserved for those who have an ongoing engagement and commitment and presence in Bermuda. So why create a different standard for 16-year-olds? Mr. Speaker, I ask, are we empowering youth or are we creating an inequitable system? Mr. Speaker, this brings me to the third point.
I recognize the honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, when has civic education ever been a basis on determining one's right to vote in Bermuda? We already know that human brains aren't even done fully developing till the age of 25, and we still let this demographic participate. We still let every other demographic in Bermuda participate. When's it time that we start to follow this global trend and actually start to incorporate 16-year-olds into voting and not base our participation based on our education? Because it's simply circular reasoning, because we already know that the only way you lead the civic preparation is through engagement as a precursor.
Thank you. I recognize the honorable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that point actually leads quite well into the third point that the opposition will be exploring, which is that voting is not merely a right. It is one of the greatest civic responsibilities that we place upon our domiciled citizens. And to address the point of information directly, Mr. Speaker, is that where there is, of course, no automatic right to civic education in this country, I may be showing my age a bit, but I do remember a time when there were programs in the school that enabled individuals to learn about Bermudian history, enabled individuals to learn about civic history. And those individuals are currently a part of the voting population, Mr. Speaker. And on top of that, Mr. Speaker, which my point will explore, is the fact that when you are dealing with individuals, while they may not have the level of civic education, they have experience and exposure and the day-to-day realities of living in Bermuda that young people just have not had the opportunity to do so for the sheer fact that they are not independent individuals just yet. And that is not a fault to them, Mr. Speaker, because the reality is we do give our young people responsibility. And that's a point the opposition accepts. We allow them to do one of the most greatest privileges that we can offer, operating a vehicle. And before, Mr. Speaker, you question, how is that a great privilege? Because you take on the safety of not only yourself, but of others when you operate a vehicle. And we trust our young people to do that, but with guardrails, such as no towing. Guardrails that were instituted by this youth parliament. Guardrails that young people looked at each other and said, we need to have some protection when we use these responsibilities, Mr. Speaker. So, finally, Mr. Speaker, this is not just about curbing, limiting youth vote. It's about aligning with youth-imposed guardrails. Mr. Speaker, to conclude, we will also be questioning throughout this debate whether this motion truly benefits the young people. Mr. Speaker, are we just putting more of a burden on an already pressured youth? Are we empowering the youth voice? Are we exhausting it by putting on the responsibility of making them vote for our country's future? Mr. Speaker, democracy involves and deserves informed participation, and our youth are not a football for political purposes to float from point to point. They deserve adequate education, and we all deserve equity in our voting system. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, we ask that the court deny the motion and keep the voting age at 18. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. Before I recognize the next member from the government bench, I would like to recognize the presence of Dennis Lister, JPMP, Dennis Lister III, JPMP, Junior Minister of Justice, and also a former youth parliamentarian as well. I recognize the honorable member Siddiqui from the government bench.
Good evening, and thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Speaker. When I was 16, I first joined Youth Parliament. Mr. Speaker, at 16, I wasn't too young to understand politics. I was eager to learn, ready to contribute, and passionate about making a difference. That experience taught me something important. Young people don't lack opinions or responsibility. They simply lack a voice where it matters the most. Today, as side government in this debate, I proudly stand in agreement with the motion. But before I begin my points, I'd like to deliver a brief rebuttal to the opposition's arguments. First, side opposition argued that Bermuda's an aging population. This is true. In fact, we agree, Mr. Speaker. However, typically in aging populations, elderly individuals find it difficult to actually get out there and vote. So, Mr. Speaker, that point directly correlates with our case. Side opposition argues that the youth don't have a voice due to the fact
Point
that
of
we
clarification,
are an aging...
Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the honorable member, yes.
Mr. Speaker, the honorable member mentioned that the older generations have a difficulty getting out and vote, but actually it was in fact the older generations that represented the largest voting population in the 2025 general election.
I recognize the honorable member.
I recognize that point, and I appreciate the side opposition for bringing that up. But I think that further correlates with our case. We don't want to put the brunt of voting on the aging population when they already have so much to deal with. As side opposition themselves said, the young people are already going through so much. But the young people have things like their health and their mobility, and the list goes on. The elderly people do not. As government, we want to change that the youth don't have a voice in the status quo. We care about the people, but more importantly, we care about Bermuda's future. Next, they also related younger voting to an oppressive system, which I would like their speakers to further clarify, because we are slightly confused on that. But they also claimed we have a lack of infrastructure. Of course, right now we have a lack of infrastructure for something that is yet to be implemented. When Bermuda developed legislation for 16-year-olds riding bikes, like they so mentioned, they also developed Project Ride. By claiming we don't have infrastructure that is currently a hypothetical, one is ignoring all the progress that Bermuda has made so far. Furthermore, side opposition said those currently voting were in a Bermuda's civic class back in the day. That's wonderful. In fact, so wonderful, we want to implement one back on the island. Mr. Speaker, why would anyone not want that? Now, moving on to my points. First, political equity. Many Bermudian students leave the island at 18 to pursue higher education overseas. And because Bermuda doesn't have a comprehensive voting system for these students abroad, many of these young adults are unable to vote in elections while they are away, which I'm sure we're all very familiar with. Ironically, they reach voting age just as they become least able to exercise that right. Lowering the voting age to 16 gives young Bermudians the opportunity to participate in at least one election before they leave for university. It ensures that they have a genuine voice in deciding the future of the country that they call home, not just the elderly aging population. Mr. Speaker, democracy should not depend on whether or not you happen to be on Bermuda soil on election day. When youth voices are underrepresented, and when youth voices are represented on a broader scale, persistent problems such as unemployment, access to education, and affordable housing are on the pathway to being solved. If the majority of young people are away pursuing higher education, how can society complain about the low voter turnout? Of course, the voter turnout will be low when the majority of our young people are away. Without youth voices, the voter turnout will stay this way. The very people who will inherit Bermuda's future are denied the chance to influence it simply because they are pursuing a higher education to improve the economy in Bermuda. Lowering the voting age to 16 helps address this inequality. While students are still living in Bermuda, attending school, and actively involved in their communities, they would have the opportunity to vote in at least one election before leaving for university. Next, my second point is how lowering the voting age will consequently increase civic engagement. At 16, young people are still in school, where they're learning about government, citizenship, and current affairs. Teachers can explain the election process, encourage informed discussions, and help students understand the importance of truly participating in democracy, which we can agree that both government and opposition want to see change. Parents are also more likely to guide and support their children while they are living at home and not 7 hours away in the United Kingdom. If the voting age is lowered to 16, more than likely schools will highly encourage civic education, which will only benefit the population. Mr. Speaker, in Bermuda, where voter turnout is already declining, we should be encouraging participation, not delaying it. By allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote, we can build a generation of informed and engaged citizens who see voting not as a burden, like those in Bermuda currently do, but as a normal part of civic life. We already don't have mandatory voting.
Point of information.
But by only listening to older voices in regards to politics, we are blacklisting one of the most important populations on the island. Ultimately, this debate is about trust. We already trust 16-year-olds to work and represent Bermuda through youth organizations. We should also trust them to say a government that shapes their futures. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize the honorable member Tuckett. You have the floor.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I get into my substantive speech today, I think that it's important that we first clarify a few positions based off of what's been raised by both the first and second speaker of the proposition. So I'm going to start off with some rebuttal. Now, the first speaker in today's debate indicated that politicians, and I think that this is an exact quote, politicians focus on who can vote, end quote. The example that was raised was with reference to the youth unemployment. Now, what I can raise in response to this as side opposition is that youth unemployment has not only been long noted as an issue on our island, but it's also been listed as a commitment quite consistently in our country. So what I say to this is it that we actually need an additional segment of our population to raise this as an issue, or do we just need to encourage those young people rather than exercising a ballot themselves? Do we just need to encourage them to find the avenues where they can pressure this, like attending things like youth parliament? Now, another issue that was raised as themes, both in points of information raised by the proposition, but also in both the substantive speeches thus far, has been this idea that becoming an active participant starts with the ballot, Mr. Speaker. That is not when becoming an active participant in our democracy actually begins. And I think that it's particularly alarming, the point of information which was raised by the third speaker of this of the proposition, which was, when has civic education been the basis or precursor for having the right to vote? The truth is, Mr. Speaker, it has not necessarily been a precursor or a requirement, but that, Mr. Speaker, is exactly why our country falls into certain challenges where we have a voting population, not necessarily the younger side of the voting population, but we have a voting population who are voting the same as they always have, not necessarily based or rooted in civic education. That is not an issue that we want to encourage or continue in our country, and so we wouldn't want to start that with fresh voters.
Yes, I recognize the honourable member from the government.
We think that it's
Use the mic, please.
We think that is incorrect to say that voting doesn't incentivize people. Pardon me?
Is it on? Okay.
We think it's incorrect to say that voting doesn't incentivize people to be engaged in civic participation. There's a reason that majority of those engaged in politics are Bermudians that can vote, and not expats or foreigners who understand that they don't have a voice in the government.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member raises a really significant point, and I want to make mention to the fact that the second speaker for the proposition started off with introducing her own experiences within youth parliament. I too can share my own experiences because that's the nature of why we're here today. The unfortunate reality, Mr. Speaker, and I don't know about you, well I do because we did youth parliament together, but when we were in this room wasn't even filled, so it doesn't necessarily speak to our entire young population. As much as we are having this debate today, we are having this debate coming to the table as relatively well-informed and civically engaged young people. We're not having the debate necessarily on behalf of those people who don't necessarily even know what constituency they live in, or they're not yet registered to vote, even if they are of voting age. So, Mr. Speaker, it's important that we come to this conversation being realistic about the existing challenges that we have, challenges that if people aren't going to come to this place on a Wednesday afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m. for youth parliament, then we need to bring it to them in classrooms. The point that we are raising a side opposition in today's debate is not to say that age is the measure for political competency, as the proposition tried to suggest. Instead, we're saying that we need to ensure that we have an educated and well-informed voting population, and before we add to that voting population, it's important that we educate those who are already prepared to vote. Now, I'll intertwine the rest of my rebuttal into my substantive speech, Mr. Speaker, for the purposes of time. As the second speaker for the opposition, Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by clarifying our position. We firmly believe that democratic participation and civic engagement among young people are vital, but we oppose the idea that lowering the age to 16 is the solution. Instead, we argue for a more holistic approach, one that invests in civic education so that all generations, not just the young, are empowered to participate meaningfully. This, as you will note, alleviates some of the pressures that side proposition tried to suggest, where we are putting the brunt on our elder population to take advantage or take control of our country in terms of voting. First, Mr. Speaker, we must emphasize that civic education is not a luxury. It's a necessity. Right now, many young people in Bermuda feel disengaged from from politics, not because they lack the interest, but because they lack the tools to understand it. So imagine a generation that is instead equipped not only with the right to vote, because as I mentioned before, it does not start with a ballot. Instead, they are equipped with the knowledge to scrutinize policy, analyses, analyze debates, and see through spin. Now, that should not be deemed as a luxury, but under the status quo, it is. Before we address adding to our voting population, we need to address that issue.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Recognize the closing member from the government. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda is an aging population, as you heard directly from the opposition. We won this debate the moment this reality was addressed. Mr. Speaker, as we stated multiple times, we don't have an absentee voting system or engaged youth. And this is precisely why Bermuda's democracy as it is stagnant and failing, because Bermuda's future is stagnant and failing. Our last election had less turnout than the 2020 election, which happened during a pandemic, Mr. Speaker. But the opposition sees nothing wrong with our current status quo or our current democracy, Mr. Speaker. We need to broaden our civic engagement before alienated young people continue to leave the island.
The Honourable Member from the opposition.
Can side proposition clarify whether they are suggesting that absentee voting shouldn't be resolved on its own and instead should be blanket fixed with a Band-Aid solution like adding to our voting population at the age of 16?
Mr. Speaker, here's the thing. We have seen throughout this debate that opposition has framed this as choosing one option or the other. But we tell you that reform can coexist with engagement. We tell you that we can reform the absentee voting system, but instead of waiting for it to happen in about 10 years' time, we can also take action now, Mr. Speaker. We can have both of these happen at the same time. We can endorse our education plan, Mr. Speaker. We can also have young people at the same time concurrently able to vote. Because what is the point of education if it's not actioned upon? We tell you, Mr. Speaker, you don't have to choose a pathway. You don't have to choose between reform or having young people vote. You can choose both. Now moving on to my rebuttals. Mr. Speaker, the first thing I'd like to rebut and refute is this notion that there's no island-wide civic participation initiatives. And Mr. Speaker, firstly, we tell you that this is an island-wide issue. This point is null because the lack of civic education impacts every demographic, not just young people. It affects old people and affects middle-aged people as well. By this logic, you might as well have an autocracy. But secondly, we tell you that civic education can coexist with civic participation because, as I've already said, civic engagement through letting 16-year-olds vote provides a direct incentive for young people in Bermuda to become politically immersed. Now, Mr. Speaker, we've also seen this notion.
Recognize the Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the query of the opposition would be, though there was no, and it's accepted, civic education in the past, many of these older voters who have been burdened with their right to vote that they fought for have exemplified and shown civic education on the grassroots of fighting for their own votes, fighting for their own equality, and fighting for their own right to be in this country. The query is, when have the young people had to have had that experience? And since they don't they need an actual course to help them?
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, our point on this has been very clear. We stated multiple times, yes, we do need courses to help this, but we've also stated the whole purpose of this course is to have people vote. So what is the purpose of implementing a course but not actually actioning the vote? Yes, older and individuals on this island had to fight for that right to vote, and now it's time for young people to fight for their right to vote, because fundamentally, there's no difference between a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old. Now, Mr. Speaker, this leads me to directly to my next point, which is that there's no magic switch where 18-year-olds magically become old enough to vote. We already see across our planet. You see the United Kingdom and other Western European nations already implementing 16-year-olds as the basis to vote. We need to follow these global trends. A 16-year-old is just as qualified to vote as an 18-year-old or an 80-year-old. Mr. Speaker, you would think team opposition wants to introduce an education test just to vote. You have this idea that you have to have an experience. You have to know what it means just to vote. Mr. Speaker, this is dangerous logic because voting is not a privilege, Mr. Speaker, it's a right. Mr. Speaker, they've also stated, existing youth forms exist, so why don't we use these youth forms as opposed to letting young people vote? But Mr. Speaker, they absolutely do. In fact, a member of one of these youth forms they mentioned is standing right in front of you. So why don't we listen to what these forms actually have to say instead of being chiefless in practice? Mr. Speaker, the same youth forms that Team Opposition heralds as an alternative are actually the same youth forms advocating to lower the voting age. It's circular logic. They state, Mr. Speaker, we can use the youth forms. Well, why don't we actually go and engage with these forms and see what they actually have to say, because all of these youth forms are advocating and they're saying that we want our right to vote. So this point is completely mute. Mr. Speaker, civic education and civic engagement can coexist. There's not an option here, Mr. Speaker. It's not, let's do these classes and then they can vote down the line when they're university and they can't even vote regardless. Mr. Speaker,
Point of information.
Mr. Speaker, we have not refuted Team Opposition's model on this case intentionally because we tell you that it works. But the difference here is that we action it beyond the classroom. We action it beyond a class. We can educate and engage, Mr. Speaker. The government is a side of both. This is why we win this debate. Now, just to summarize, Mr. Speaker, we have presented a multifaceted case today. We have shown you that we have to follow global trends. We have shown you that Bermuda in particular desperately needs civic engagement. I want to circle back to how I began the speech, Mr. Speaker. It's true, we live in an aging population. We live in in fact, on average, one of the oldest populations on the entire earth as a high-income economy. This we did not dispute, Mr. Speaker. And as opposition told you directly through this statistic, we need civic engagement now. We need young people to vote now because this key demographic, the future of Bermuda, is actually being excluded because we don't have an absentee voting system. And if we did, it would still not be enough because of our aging population, because of the fact that 16 and 17-year-olds currently are locked out of the vote. We see that shifting more and more to one demographic. A democracy, Mr. Speaker, is not about an old person or middle-aged person. It's about every single element of society, whether or not you want to hear them speak or not. Mr. Speaker, on the basis of the tenets of democracy, we strongly support the government's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I recognize the closing member from the opposition. You have the floor.
Good afternoon. It's great to be back in Youth Parliament. I think before I get into the meat of my rebuttal, I just want to walk through some of the things that we've heard throughout this debate, because there's been little quibs thrown back and forth across the House, and I think it's important to address this. So once again, what are we debating? First of all, the question before us is: would we lower the voting age to 16 in Bermuda? And, when one of the first things stated by the first speaker of the proposition was that the youth deserve the right to vote based on their civic engagement, based on the fact that once you turn 16, you're able to work, and you should have a voice in these sorts of things. We find that quite of a tricky point, specifically on this point of responsibility. If you think about it, at the age of 16, yes, you may have the right to get a bike, you might have the right to go out and work, but the responsibilities to the state are minuscule and a very watered down version of what an 18-year-old's responsibilities are. If King Charles says tomorrow that he wants to join Donald Trump on the invasion of Panama and Greenland, ladies and gentlemen, the members of the proposition are not going to be enlisted into that service. Rather, it will be those above the age of 18. So once again, with the right not accepted at this time.
I recognize the Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker.
Don't forget your place, Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, the opposition talks about a 6-year not being enlisted in the military. Mr. Speaker, neither would somebody above the age of 45. What are these abstract precursors to participation? Mr. Speaker, there's no clause in the Constitution that states thou must be a member of society. You could be anybody you want to be in the society, and that as long as you have the capacity to vote, you have the right to vote. So why are we putting essentially a gate beyond the right to vote through, your patriotism, through whether or not you enlist, through whether or not you're educated to do so? What are these abstract gates that Team Opposition keeps advocating for, Mr. Speaker, because it's completely unconstitutional and unlike what this island is founded on?
Get the floor.
Yeah, well, I would say that, okay, even if I take you at your best argument there, where you say that, it's not always, yes, the case of going to war might be an extreme example, but in cases of taxation and other things like that, there are still exemptions made for people under the age of 16. And yes, you can say those same exemptions apply to people over the age of 65, but we recognize that these things change based on a person's contribution to society over time. So this point that there's an equivalence between a 65-year-old who's worked probably for 40 to 45 years of their life versus a 16-year-old who hasn't worked a day based on their contribution to society is just empirically false. But then
I recognize the Honourable Member.
I would also like to say that that point is incorrect, because by saying that a 16-year-old contributes something different than an 18-year-old to the economy, that point falls flat, because a rich person contributes something very different than a poor person to the economy, yet still they have the same right to vote. So what are you really saying? Because a lot of people in Bermuda don't actually contribute to the economy. They might live here, they might not have to work because their family's rich, yet they still have a voice in the government.
Please be reminded to address your comments to the speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To continue on with my speech, I think there's some other points that need to be addressed from today's debate. So firstly, let's talk about the creation of incentives point for politicians. The key argument that they started off on top of the House is that, by including 16 and 17-year-olds into the voting population, you're going to skew who politicians aim their policies at, and this is going to lead to better outcomes for younger individuals. Once again, we said, just based on an empirical fact, ladies and gentlemen, we're an aging population, and by changing the voting age from 18 to 16, the marginal attention that is going to be paid by the Premier or the Minister of Youth Affairs, ladies and gentlemen, to younger individuals is going to be minuscule. But let's go on beyond this. They tried to bring examples of real life examples, and I like some of them that they brought in. They brought in these cases of Brazil, Argentina, places across Western Europe. If we look across all of these countries, what do we see? Do we see democratic improvement? No, ladies and gentlemen. We see democratic backslide. And why do we see this? We see this not because inclusion is not just the way that you get better civic engagement and better democratic institutions. Rather, the democratic institutions and their strength are underpinned by how the largest voting bodies are served by the politicians in power. And by increasing the population, you're actually not helping you're not going to shape politicians' policy preferences towards those individuals who sort of help undermine underpin democratic institutions. Now, also on this point of political equity that they made, we see that once again it gets. Why do we, our key question on this point is, do we obtain better political equity for younger individuals by education alone? On this side of the House, our argument is that it's the most that you can get for this age cohort. And the key reason why we say this is, once again, because of the responsibilities laid upon youth. As the point made by my first speaker, we argue that we don't want to overburden youth at such a young age where they're still developing their view on civic engagement and their independent perspectives with this enormous responsibility of voting.
Your time has concluded.
Okay, thank you.
I'll now allow our judges a moment to adjudicate. Do you want to step out, or you're good? While our judges are going to adjudicate, I'll make a few closing remarks. I just want to thank you all for this wonderful and spirited and thoughtful debate. It's very refreshing to be sitting in this chair as Speaker of the House, as I did for 2 years during my time as a youth parliamentarian. Thank you very much. This debate has explored important questions about our democracy, and I hope those who are members of the actual House of Assembly who are present today were listening closely, including youth participation, civic responsibility, political maturity, and representation. Regardless of which side you may be more in favor of, today's discussion reflects the spirit of youth parliament. Respectful dialogue, critical thinking, evidence-based arguments, and leadership in action. Please join me in thanking both the government and the opposition benches for their excellent contributions. While we wait for the judge to adjudicate, I'll recognize the Honorable Speaker to make some comments.
Good? Bow to the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you mind if I use this mic?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Good evening, everyone. Obviously, I didn't intend to make a remark. I was sitting back here doing something I normally don't do. I don't get the opportunity to be in the gallery as a visitor, so I was enjoying that perspective. But being I'm here, let me make some comments in that what you've seen today, particularly for those of the TV audience or listening audience who are tuned in today, you've seen what takes place in our youth parliament over the years. We have current members who are acting as the government members today. We have former members as the opposition. And you've noticed the debate that's taking place between, how am I going to put it, the generation difference, because these are our younger members who are current. These are some more, I wouldn't say senior members, but former members. But the issue is that what we've seen over the years that the young people do come in here and express their viewpoints on current issues in Bermuda. And that's the reason that we have youth parliament, so that there's a forum for young people to come in here in the setting of a real parliament, in the same seats, the same chamber that the actual members of parliament sit in to discuss the issues of the day. So we want to encourage young people who are listening out in the audience, parents who are listening out in the audience, to encourage their young people to use this forum that's here for them. It does a few things. It helps to build their confidence in getting up and speaking publicly, as you've seen here. We've also noticed, I should highlight, that two of our former members present today have spoken internationally at the British Youth Parliament, Westminster Youth Parliament on Youth Parliament Day. One of the members, I'm sorry, have been there. And so these are the opportunities that are available to our young people now as they become members of the Youth Parliament. But it gives them the confidence and to stand and speak, but it also gives them a good understanding of how Parliament works. They get to participate firsthand. They get to participate in that. They select the roles that they play. It's not the input coming from the senior parliament, but from the members and advisors themselves saying who would be the opposition, who would be the premier, who would be the speaker, who would be whichever ministers that are designated for the youth parliament, and they select the different ministers themselves. So it's an excellent forum for young people to be able to come in and embrace what goes on daily as an active real parliament into what the youth parliament can do. They are an excellent voice for the young people, and we would like to see that, and over the years, the numbers fluctuate up and down, and that sometimes relates to the current climate in the country, politically, some things that are going on, but we want to encourage these seats to be filled all the time with members from the age bracket. We normally have members, and this is a advert, I should say, for the youth parliament. We have members from the youth middle school onward up. So if you are parents sitting home listening to this, your students who are middle-aged students on to high school students, there's a place here for them in youth parliament. The advisors are here to assist and direct, but it's the young people themselves who really carry this when they get in the room and present and speak for themselves on the issues that they see. The topics that they normally pick are topics that they see as current topics, or it could be a topic that we may be doing in Parliament and they want to put their input into it. So it's an excellent forum. I encourage all young people to look to Youth Parliament. I take my hat off to those who are participating in this event today, our current members and our former members, and thank you to the former members for making yourself available. And I advise that you continue to make yourselves available in whatever way you can to assist the current members so that Youth Parliament continues to go on and be effective for the voice of the young people in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While we wait for the judges, I would recognize the honorable members if you have anything you want to say, not related to the debate, but perhaps about your experience at Youth Parliament, the importance of Youth Parliament. Now's the time. I recognize the honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in regards of celebratory remarks. I wish to give celebratory remarks to Miss Sarah on her recent graduation from Summersfield.
Thank you, Ms. Keynes. It seems our judges are back. I will recognize the honorable minister. You can stand. You can press the mic right there. The honorable minister will announce the winner and give a few closing remarks. Don't forget to turn it on.
We can move it. Good afternoon, everyone. I will start by announcing the winners before I give a few closing remarks. The winner for the government was Zara. Yeah. Am I getting certificates? Are we going to be certificates? Overall. Okay. And the winner for the opposition was Mackenzie. And the overall winner was the opposition. Closing remarks?
Should we present the trophies first?
Let's do the
Ministers? Yes, let's do the trophies and certificates, and then the minister can give a few closing remarks. Yeah, come in the center right here. You can go in the center, please.
You just want to do a picture.
Yeah.
Mackenzie Cole Puckett. Monica Clark. Christopher Medeiros.
Chris.
Zara. And Ariana Kane.
That's for the winning team. That's for the opposition as a whole. So if they can rise and get some pictures of the trophies. There's one for each of you. I'll open the floor again to the minister for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I first want to say congratulations to our debaters, Monica, Ariana, Zara, Mackenzie, Chris, Yaiwan. I know it takes a great bit of preparation when it comes to debates. And we just want to congratulate you for continuing within Youth Parliament, our current youth parliamentarians, and also our former youth parliamentarians. It is great to see the experience and growth, and I hope that you take the opportunity to collaborate more. One thing about this debate this evening is we recognize that the speaker is always in control. But to hear the content and the information as far as how passionate we can be about particular issues, the persuasive communication styles that are important to embrace with factual information, to be able to rebut the content that is being shared, the tone in the voice, and how that makes a difference in people's alertness and being able to listen more keenly. And also the varying views, which are very important because we know that people have different experiences and reasons why someone should be for a particular position or against a particular position. But most importantly, this evening, which was highlighted for me, was the understanding or the linkage between civic engagement and civic participation, how they are both important, particularly as it surrounded the position of this debate. So again, I want to just say congratulations and thank you for your participation in tonight's debate.
Thank you, Minister. Before we close, I just want to recognize the presence of the Honorable Joshe Adams, JP MP, Minister of Works and the Environment, just arrived. And with that, I will adjourn the House. Very much. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Please give me a motion. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to adjourn this House indefinitely.
Please rise.
Bermuda Live on YouTube. Subscribe now.